Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And even though it's been a couple of days since we last talked to you, there's been lots and lots of news in the world of motorsports, specifically in silly season across all sorts of motorsports here. So we'll have that with you in a moment, and also we're going to do our Richmond fantasy preview for the NASCAR Cup Series.
Of course.
Their second weekend here in the playoffs. So lots to talk about and kind of discuss and go back and forth here as we start off the show here with the news and notes. So first off, Kyle, how are you doing today after all the news that has broke over the past couple of days?
It's been chaotic, man. There's been so much silly season news. It feels like the big domino in each sport has kind of fallen at this point. Of course, you've got Jimmie Johnson now confirmed for IndyCar in his schedule, which we'll talk about first coming up here. But then you've got the Sebastian Vettel domino. Then you also have the RPM and Bubba Wallace domino falling. I feel like the only thing that could really cap it off is if we had the 48 announcement this week as well, which hopefully we don't, because we need some news at some point other than just this week in the season. But I'm doing good. It's been chaotic, and just having the phone pop up with new motorsports news every seemingly 5 minutes has been fun.
Yeah, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly.
It just feels like that with all the notifications. But the board for our visual watchers is pretty full. It's about as much as I can put on it. So, and there's even more to discuss besides what's on that board today. So we'll get right into it here. We'll start off with some IndyCar news, but with a current Cup Series driver, a Cup Series legend in Jimmie Johnson. He has signed a 2-year agreement with Chip Ganassi Racing in the IndyCar Series to run the full street course and road course circuit for 2021 and 2022. So we kind of speculated, he's done some tests over the past couple of years, and specifically this season, done a couple of tests. This latest one was with Chip Ganassi Racing, and it seems like Jimmie Johnson's career is learning towards the open wheel and from the stock car side of things. So it's just huge news in the silly season prediction. I thought he was going to go to Aaron McLaren with their previous sort of relationship in terms of the driver swap and car swap with Fernando Alonso. Just got the organization wrong, and not full-time, but still a lot of damn races for Jimmie Johnson to go into IndyCar for next season. So he was not joking when he said he was serious about this. And Kyle, this is obviously a big we kind of knew that this was going to be coming eventually here, but it's a big news for NASCAR and prominent Cup Series champion to be switching motorsports like this.
Well, it's not that long ago that we were only expecting him to run a couple of races, maybe next season, maybe like Long Beach, his home track, and then maybe like the Indy Grand Prix, not the 500, but the road course layout. And then all of a sudden he goes on Dale Jr. Download and talks about how he wants to run a full street course schedule for both this season and next and see what comes in the future. And he's now more open to oval, and all this kind of stuff drops in the one day. And we're like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? He has the test with Chip Ganassi. He has the previous test that he was supposed to do with McLaren. Like, there's all this stuff that's happening. And now we finally know what's actually going to happen. And we know it's Chip Ganassi Racing, which has some other different things that we can talk about in a second as well. But Chip Ganassi, some of the top equipment in the sport, the entire street course schedule as well, which is going to be awesome to see because Jimmie Johnson is a very much an adequate road racer in NASCAR, but isn't necessarily that like above and beyond guy who's like the threat week in, week out. He's good, don't get me wrong, but he isn't like Jeff Gordon in his prime. He wasn't like Juan Pablo Montoya or Marcus Ambrose, who are those kind of road course ringers. He's been good, but we've seen his interest over these years, whether it's the F1 test that he did, the seat swap with Alonso, or more recently here with these IndyCar tests, that he has a real interest in the proper open wheel road course cars. And we're going to see it for the next 2 seasons, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, he doesn't have any sponsorship for next season or anything like that. So this agreement is just
confirmed,
tentative.
Yeah.
It's confirmed that he wants to run it is essentially what this deal does. And he's locked up with an organization. They just need to find that sponsorship to fully get him going for next season and the next season after that, which I'm sure that somebody will sponsor Jimmie Johnson in the IndyCar Series.
I have a feeling like
it's basically inevitable.
Yeah, if there's any name that you're adding to a schedule where you're trying to find sponsorship for them, I feel like there are a lot harder ones to try and find sponsorship for than Jimmie frickin' Johnson.
It'll be interesting to see if Ally maybe comes over from the Cup Series to sponsor him in some sort of capacity, or if they're going to just stay with NASCAR. But obviously, big news there. We'll just start off the show with that, with Jimmie Johnson. lots of cool things with him and everything that he's done over the past week with the throwback, and now he's totally set his sights on his future here outside of NASCAR. So it's going to be sad to see Jimmie Johnson leave the sport, but at least he's not leaving racing entirely, so we'll see him quite a bit on the track from here on out. So that's kind of the IndyCar side of things mixed with the Cup Series note there, but we'll get into Formula One here, as this was quite the big rumor that's been going on, circulating for the past couple of months. Who was going to leave Racing Point for next season, because you have the 4-time world champion in Sebastian Vettel looking for a ride, and this was the last basically competitive seat that he could go to. And unfortunately for Sergio Perez, he had to be kicked out by Racing Point, something that kind of shocked him in a way last night, that he got the news that broke to him. So Sergio Perez is out at Racing Point, what is soon to be called Aston Martin, for next season, and Sebastian Vettel goes over there and takes his spot for next season. So big news there, Kyle, as we have basically the last big silly season domino in Formula One to fall with competitive teams.
Yeah, absolutely massive domino. It had been speculated for a while that Aston Martin and Sebastian Vettel were going to have some sort of relationship into next season. We didn't know if it would actually happen, and if so, who would be the one on the out. But based on how this season is played out, I think if this happens earlier in the season, we're maybe talking about a different driver on the out, which we can talk about in a second. But a huge, huge coup for Aston Martin, whether that's on track or in terms of marketing. Sebastian Vettel remains one of the most marketable, just basically the biggest, alongside Lewis Hamilton in terms of star power in the sport. People still love him, probably even more so than they did back when he was at Red Bull, because he's not winning all the time. But it's a huge, huge thing for Aston Martin here as they continue to progress up the grid. Of course, Racing Point now, but next season rebranding as Aston Martin as the team name. That's huge for them. Getting a multi-time world champion into that car is going to be huge. It's going to be interesting to see Vettel back in a more competitive car, but also still mid-pack, and how that will maybe work. But it's also huge for the team because you have Lance Stroll being able to learn from a 4-time world champion now in Vettel. So that's going to be huge as well. But it is a little bit shocking that Sergio Perez is out of that team. Of course, he basically is the only reason why the team is even here to begin with today, talking about it as in Racing Point. He's been there for so long, I believe 7 years. He's been Force India. He's been Racing Point. He's got 5 of like the 6 podiums that they've had in like the current iteration of the team. Like it's remarkable what he's done for the team. And it's just kind of the cutthroat, cold-hearted sport that it is, where he's on the outside. But really looking at the performances this year, when you factor in age, relationship, everything that goes into the decision picking between Perez and Stroll and who would be out for Vettel there, it kind of does make sense to stick with Stroll based off of what we've seen this season. Your thoughts on kind of everything that's played out here?
Yeah, I mean, Lance Stroll has, performed admirably in this car this season. And obviously, Sergio Perez missed the British Grand Prix with COVID. And I don't know if that didn't help any situations with him in terms of negotiations or not. I imagine they let him slide on that. But Lance Stroll is going to get to learn a lot from Sebastian Vettel. Vettel said he was close to even retiring here if the opportunity didn't present itself, where he felt like he could be in a situation where he could compete at a high level. And with the new regulations coming in 2 years' time, with everybody sort of being on a similar or even playing field then, he thinks that there's potential to really challenge for podiums and maybe even race wins with the direction that this team's going. I found it hard to believe if Stroll was ever going to leave the team with his dad so invested in the team itself. It's going to be pretty harsh at the Thanksgiving dinner if that would be the case. We got to kick you out, son. Like, I can't imagine that kind of conversation. And I think we'd be seeing a totally different situation, like you said, if Lance Stroll hadn't performed as well as he has this season. Not to knock Sergio Perez, he's done a very good job so far as well. But Lance Stroll with the podium this past weekend, just obviously he could have been in contention for a race win like we discussed, but a podium nonetheless is huge and goes a long way in terms of these negotiations, and they're getting one heck of a driver in Sebastian Vettel, who's going to be hungry to look to get into competitive and not back marker equipment is basically what Ferrari has become this season, not making out of Q1 on many weeks here, and not being able to score points on a consistent enough basis. So this is huge for Aston Martin, and I can't wait to see what Vettel can do in that car next season. Obviously, Perez, we don't know where he's going to go yet. He seemed like he was comfortable with being at Racing Point. Everything what he'd heard so far was that he was going to return to the team, but obviously that's not to be the case. So where he ends up, that's to be determined. I'd love to know where you think he would end up here, Kyle, because there's not too many spots open for him to go.
Yeah, that's the tough part about it, because there aren't really any competitive seats left. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the second Red Bull seat right now, but we can almost guarantee that it's going to be somebody in the Red Bull program. So whether that's Alex Albon remaining there, or Pierre Gasly going back up, whatever happens there, the odds of them bringing in somebody outside of their program are less than 1%, if we're being honest. So that's basically written off. Even though Lewis Hamilton doesn't have a contract for next season yet, nothing's happening there. We don't need to worry about that. He's going to be in that seat. And when you look at where the dust settles then, because everything's already played out with Renault, McLaren, everybody else in that midfield, you're left with Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, but again, that's Red Bull junior program right there, and then Haas, essentially. So I really don't know if we see Sergio Perez in Formula One next season. I don't know if maybe Alfa Romeo entices him because of the Ferrari ties there, but I don't really see Haas enticing him all that much, because he did say in his kind of exit letter announcement that he wouldn't be returning, that he's going to be looking for something that piques his interest, that motivates him to continue racing. And I don't really know if that comes at Haas based off of what we've seen these last couple seasons. It's a good fit in terms of maybe potentially pairing with Kevin Magnussen for next season. That's a pretty solid driver lineup there for Haas, but I don't know if he takes that. And if Alfa Romeo, they don't necessarily go down that route, because of course that team only has one seat to pick for themselves. The other one goes to a Ferrari junior program driver. I don't know if we see him in Formula One next season, and whether that means that he goes to endurance racing, maybe because he's Mexican and the ties are to North America. Maybe we could see some kind of IndyCar route, maybe, I don't know, but I'd probably put it at 50-50 at most that he remains in Formula One for next season.
I think you could be looking a little bit like an Esteban Ocon situation here. Maybe he takes, I know he's a different age and everything like that in terms of development. He's an experienced driver. He should be on the grid, but you take a year off, maybe you see what opportunities presents themselves. I think the key is that Renault and McLaren are both tied up. I think those would be, you look at those two teams as options that would be a suitable replacement for him. But with them both being taken up here, it's going to be a tough struggle here for Perez. And it wasn't too long ago we were looking at him in the Ferrari seat when they had an opening there before Vettel came over, or even Raikkonen, when they both switched. It's like when Raikkonen was meant to leave maybe on a year-to-year basis kind of thing, and who's going to maybe replace him, but he kept on coming back, and Perez never got that shot at Ferrari or at a top seat because he had performed so well in the silver and orange Force India, what it was that season. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see where Perez goes. I think Alfa Romeo and Haas seem like the most likely options, obviously. Those are kind of only his two options, to be honest. And there's a lot of names that could fill those spots. You've got Nico Hülkenberg trying to make a return into Formula One after how he performed in the Force or in the Racing Point earlier this season when he had to fill in for Perez. I mean, can you imagine that kind of a lineup where you have Hülkenberg and Perez just taking over?
Well, I mean, if you're Alfa Romeo, that's probably what your goal would be, but you can't, because you have to have a Ferrari junior driver in there. And I mean, whether it's Callum Ilott, Mick Schumacher, or Robert Schwartzman, one of those three getting that seat next season, you're probably not disappointed with that based off what we saw Charles Leclerc do not too long ago. But you can really only pick between one of the – you basically get your pick of Hülkenberg, Perez, or keeping Giovinazzi. We'll see what happens there. And then there's the Haas card as well and what they end up doing. But it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. If there's a wild card of the IndyCar route, we'll see if that is potentially something that we see, because Marcus Ericsson's the last one to do it, go from Formula One over to IndyCar after losing his seat, which was kind of a more unexpected one, because you didn't really have those clear-cut ties like you maybe would with Perez being Mexican and the sponsorship dollars that would come with him to North America as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But again, this is all the trickle-down effect of Sebastian Vettel being kicked out of his Ferrari ride, all of a sudden becoming the big marquee free agent on the verge of retiring from Formula One, finds a perfect fit, if we're being honest, with Aston Martin, whether it's the brand of Aston Martin or the way that they're projecting to go into the future here in Formula One. It's the perfect time to have that marriage. And it's unfortunate for Sergio Perez. It's brutal timing once again for him. It seems like that's been the case for most of his career, if we're being honest. But again, it's going to be fun to see how this plays out from here on out.
It's crazy to see, like, you know, a guy does everything right, everything that you could ask him for, and he still gets the boot.
Everything.
He couldn't do anything else than what he's done for that team, and on the track and off the track, in terms of what he brings in sponsorship dollars and his performance in that car. So it's so unfortunate for him. I mean, you feel for anybody that loses a seat like this. At the same time, you love to see Vettel getting a second shot here after basically getting kicked out of Ferrari. For, you know, a younger guy in Carlos Sainz, who's done exceptionally well as he's come through the ranks here. But there's not enough cars on the grid to fill everybody's, dream lineup here. And it's unfortunate to say that. But let's just finish the topic here with, if you had to pick where Perez is going to end up for next season, I know it just happened and everything's so fresh, but if you were to predict where he would end up in 2021, what would you say?
Even though, as I stand right now, or sit, I guess, I don't think it really entices him all that much. I think that he would rather take the Formula One seat than maybe go over to IndyCar, at least right now. Just kind of try and stay around the grid and maybe find that free agent seat maybe for next season or something. So I think the Alfa Romeo seat will go elsewhere. I think he'll go to Haas for next year, maybe on like a short-term deal, a one-year thing, and then reevaluate his options as silly season plays out next year.
Yeah, I had the same kind of rationale there. I think it makes sense for him to go to Haas. I think they need a revamp in that lineup. I think they just need fresh blood in there. Yeah. And I think Sergio Perez is, you know, if you're Haas, you have to look at him and, you know, you got to move Romain Grosjean or even Kevin Magnussen out of that seat to get a guy like that in there, just because it could, you know, improve your program.
Exactly. And we've seen what Perez has been able to do year over year with Force India and then into Racing Point in terms of dragging that program up the grid, whether that's in individual performances or year over year, and helping the development of that car. And that's something that Haas needs right now, because we saw them come into Formula One guns a-blazing, getting very solid points finishes, and it's just been downhill since then. The driver lineups kind of got stale, and they just kind of need that spark to really get them going again. And I feel like a driver like Perez, or if they end up going a different route in Hülkenberg or something, but I feel like Perez would be a very, very good fit there, because not only is it one of the top midfield drivers that we've seen over these past few seasons, he's also Mexican, and it's the American team. So maybe you can work some sponsorship there as well. So it just seems like a very good fit. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition, if that's something that piques his interest, and if he wants to take that opportunity. But again, I've said it a couple times now, but silly season across the board has been fascinating. And once again, it'll be fun to see how things play out.
Yeah, in a pandemic-driven season, there's been a lot of movement, which I didn't see coming, to be honest. I think a lot of people wanted, you know, stability for their future in terms of just, you know, staying put, maybe, but that's been anything but. So it's very, very interesting to see what's going on behind the scenes a little bit here within the driver's mindset on where they think they can perform best, and the organizations where they think they can get out of the car. So obviously huge for Sebastian Vettel to get back into a competitive seat and staying in Formula One. And obviously on the negative side of things, you look at Perez and the unfortunate situation there. So I think we've talked about that quite a bit here, Kyle. It's obviously going to be an evolving situation with Perez, but Sebastian Vettel is going to be on the grid for 2021 and beyond. So very, very exciting stuff for him and his current team in Ferrari. Obviously, this is a huge weekend for that team, as this is going to be their 1,000th GP in Formula One, and they're running a special livery because of it in kind of a darker red. It looks pretty slick, not going to lie. Yeah, I think it looks really good, and the yellow stands out with it. They're kind of keeping it to the classic colors of Ferrari that are so well known. So just your initial thoughts here on the paint scheme, Kyle, because I mean, it's obviously a huge weekend for Ferrari in itself. Maybe it won't be the best on-track performance, but at least if the car looks good, it'll be a good weekend for them.
Yeah, it looks crisp. I mean, anytime you go with a special livery, it's usually hit or miss, but I think this is a very strong one. Hopefully we see some kind of performance uptick here.
Get some points.
Get something going maybe. But no, the car looks good. That's the most important part right now because the performance definitely isn't. It's also going to be cool to see Mick Schumacher. He's going to be driving the 2004 Ferrari a couple laps or a lap. I saw just a few minutes ago. That's going to be pretty cool to see, of course. His dad, Michael, just did fantastic things in the Ferrari for much of these 2000s. So it's going to be cool to see that this coming weekend as well. And it just kind of fits because it's in Italy and it's a new track as well. And it is kind of funny that the Vettel news drops this weekend of all weekends. That's a little bit funny. But no, the thousands GP, that's such a crazy milestone. You can't really fathom it if you're being honest. But the new livery does look good, I got to say.
Yeah, on that topic of Vettel leaving Ferrari, announcing his plans for 2021 on the weekend, as special as this for that team, it's kind of like a shot back.
Overshadows, yeah, it's pretty funny.
After everything that Ferrari's kind of put him through this season in terms of basically demoting him to a second driver and, just not putting his priorities where they need to be for a four-time world champion and everything that he's done for that team. This is, I feel good that Vettel's kind of doing this back to them because Ferrari kind of deserve it in a sense. But, I just hope Vettel and Ferrari, they've got something to prove this weekend for their second time at their home GP this weekend in Italy. So going to be a very interesting race. It's kind of even playing field like we discussed earlier this week with a new circuit. No one's really ever driven on it before on the current grid. So it's going to be interesting to see if car performance is as big of a deal. I'm sure it will be, but if driver skill can come into play quite a bit over this weekend as well. So that's kind of all the news with Formula One, I'd say, Kyle. But we have a former F1 driver in Mark Webber. He's the latest addition to the SRX Racing Series, the one by Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham that we've talked about on pretty much every week here. They seem like
they're coming thick and fast now.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. We obviously had the early one this week with I forget who was
Willie T. Ribs was
Willie T.
Ribs,
the
first one this week.
Yeah, and then Mark Webber. This I guess it was announced yesterday. So obviously a big name there. And Mark Webber, he's done some work with Formula One and Sky Sports on the broadcast team, doing some post-race interviews and whatnot. But he's going back into the racing scene in terms of this series in North America for next season. So that's going to be very, very cool to see him over here in North America. So. Good addition to the racing series there.
Fantastic addition. I'm excited to see that.
Lots of great names in this series right now. It's going to be super fun.
I got the list right here. It's pretty crazy. So, of course, you've got Tony Stewart off the top, but then Tony Kanaan, Paul Tracy from IndyCar there, Bobby Labonte, Elio Castroneves, everything he's done primarily from IndyCar, but has done some endurance stuff recently. And then, of course, Willie T. Ribs out of nowhere, one of the elder statesman probably of the series, but has some fantastic history, and motorsports is one of the more important minority figures of these past few decades here in motorsports. And then adding Mark Webber to that list with Formula One and everything that he's done there, like it's shaping up to be a fantastic lineup. And that's only 7 drivers. I'm sure there's plenty more names to come, whether it's full-time drivers or part-time drivers. This is shaping up to be a very, very fun series.
Yeah, I'd love to see another Cup Series driver come in there. Obviously, a little bit biased
I'm sure we'll see a handful more.
I'd be interested to see how they kind of end it with like the biggest name or what they decide to do with that. I mean, obviously Dale Earnhardt Jr. kind of pops out at you because he's discussed his interest in the series, and it would be cool to see him. Jeff Gordon obviously pops out as another one. Maybe it comes down to who's broadcasting at that point in time, who has the availability. But it's going to be very, very cool to see all these legends in motorsports battling it out for the ultimate prize of we don't know what, to be honest.
Yeah,
we don't
exactly.
know what the prize is. It's a to be determined prize. We don't know the format.
We don't know the schedule. We don't know anything. All we know is that they're planning on short tracks and they're planning on maybe one road course. That's all we got.
Yeah, and we have a graphic-looking car, not like a set-in-stone car, a kind of drawn-out picture of a car. So very initial stages of this series, but nonetheless, it's going to be very, very fun to watch. We'll be definitely watching intensely next summer when it is occurring.
Yeah, we will.
That's the last bit of news there on the international side of things here. We'll go to NASCAR here before we go into the fantasy preview here with all the big news. And the big one this morning, Bubba Wallace is not returning to Richard Petty Motorsports in 2021. This is a huge domino to fall in NASCAR silly season. We both predicted him to return to the 43 in what seems like a long time ago in terms of our silly season predictions.
Yeah, when we did that prediction, that was before the initial report that there was an offer on the table from the 42 team. Like that's how long ago we're talking now. It's crazy how things have played out here. But yeah, the huge news this morning that he won't be returning. And of course, now the speculation goes to who's going to go to the 43 and where's Bubba Wallace going to go. So we were talking about it a little bit earlier today, and there's really only 3 upgrades unconfirmed for next season from that 43 car. You're looking at, of course, the 42, which is where most people think he goes, but there's also the 48 unconfirmed, and then the 14 that we've yet to confirm. But I feel like that one's a long, long shot. I feel like the 14 is probably at this point going to be one of Clint Boyer, Chase Briscoe, or Kyle Larson. I feel like it's down to the 2 Chevys there for Bubba Wallace.
Yeah, and him staying in the Chevrolet camp.
Yeah. And that just makes sense there. So
it's 2 good seats, man.
They're both 2 incredible. Pretty good seats. So where do you? Of course, most people think the 42, but even after the announcement, we got some news from Jenna Fryer that maybe the 42 offer isn't as concrete as we thought it was.
Yeah, Jenna Fryer, like you said, she has an understanding that the offer from Chip Ganassi was rescinded because they didn't hear any. There's a lack of response from Bubba Wallace in terms of getting a contract or anything kind of sorted out. But obviously, Bubba Wallace has gotten tons of sponsorship over the past couple of months over the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that he's gone through in terms of being the spokesman kind of for the sport among the active drivers in the Cup Series. It's been a crazy year for Bubba Wallace, and the fact that he's taking all the negativity that he's had to face in stride and he's turning it into a positive for his career is huge. And if he either is going to the 42 or 48, you have to look at Bubba Wallace as a playoff contender next season based on that equipment. Obviously, the 42 with Matt Kenseth this season has been underwhelming to say the least. And I think Bubba Wallace brings a lot to that, especially if they put practice time and all that stuff for next season back in. But this is a huge move here for Bubba Wallace's career because he's taking away someone else's competitive ride here. You've got names like Eric Jones out there on the silly season market in free agency looking for a ride for next season. And I imagine whichever one Bubba Wallace does pick, the other one is likely to go to Eric Jones. That would make the most sense in terms of who's left. But what a huge move here for Bubba Wallace's career. I can't blame him for leaving Richard Petty Motorsports because he has offers on the table to move somewhere else. He wouldn't be doing this if he didn't have something in place or something tentatively in agreement with some other organization. I can't imagine he's taking a bet on himself that someone else is just going to come up there and sign him. He's obviously had interest from other teams. If he goes to Hendrick, what a replacement that is for Jimmie Johnson, the 7-time champ. That's a huge shoes to fill for Bubba Wallace, the pressure that's going to be on his shoulders. An iconic team like Hendrick Motorsports, or even Chip Ganassi Racing in the 42 car, a team that's had success in the past with Kyle Larson too. So, Kyle, this is a huge domino with Bubba Wallace. And if you were to pick something right here, where would you think that he's going to go for next season, whether that's the 42, the 48, or do you have something off the board that we maybe not even are looking at?
Well, that kind of off the board thing is the rumor that keeps getting into every single conversation, and it's what the hell's going on with Denny Hamlin and the talks of maybe talking with a team about ownership and whatever's going on there, and whether that's creating a new team and buying a charter, or the rumor previous was ownership with Richard Petty Motorsports, but now that Bubba Wallace is leaving, that doesn't make sense. And there's that, which is completely off the board. I'm not going to even remotely touch that because I have no clue what's going on there. I do think he ends up in the 42. It just makes the most sense when you look at all the different factors. I feel like the 48 would be too big of a step up in equipment for Bubba Wallace based on his talent level. He's a good driver. I think he's a better driver than a 23rd, 24th place car like Richard Petty Motorsports is right now. But I don't think that he's that upper echelon driver that can challenge for championships, which you would expect out of a Hendrick Motorsports team. So I feel like the 42 car is the perfect kind of middle ground where it's a competitive car. It can go out and win races in certain situations. We've seen it from Kyle Larson year in, year out, but we've also seen it from Kurt Busch, which I feel like is much more of the expectation level for Bubba Wallace stepping into whatever ride he ends up going to next year. When you look at the McDonald's partnership and that they already sponsored Bubba Wallace, and they have the other sponsorship with the 42, the boatload of sponsorship that is coming with him, I just feel like it makes the most sense to go to the 42. And since that rumor's kind of come out, it's really made the most sense all along. And I'm a little surprised that it's taken this long to really get some kind of first announcement. I figured we would have maybe got an announcement of him leaving maybe a couple weeks ago, and by this point we would know where he is going for next season. But based on the cars available still, based on everything he's bringing, I feel like that 42 makes the most sense for everybody involved.
Yeah, I agree. I think the 42 car is that middle ground, like you said. It just makes the most sense for his career and the way it's projecting to go. Obviously, I would love to see Erik Jones in that 48 car as well. I'm being a little selfish there. I think he deserves that car after everything that he's gone through as well. Being in top-level equipment at Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't know if he necessarily deserves the downgrade. It may be a slight downgrade, but a downgrade nonetheless to Chip Ganassi if Bubba Wallace were maybe to take that 48 seat. And so I hope that's kind of where the silly season kind of ends up here with Erik Jones in the 48 and Bubba Wallace in the 42. But then that leaves a huge hole in the 43 team. And where that team goes, I think that's kind of almost being forgotten a little bit. Obviously, it's fresh in the people's minds, but Bubba Wallace is the big story here. But Richard Petty Motorsports has taken that step forward a bit this season as well, with Bubba Wallace driving with a bit of fire underneath his ass a little bit with everything that's going on. And obviously RCR, that connection there, having that organization improving this season as well, has just brought that entire threesome of cars up the pack in terms of the midfield battle. So the 43 car is open. There's lots of different candidates. Obviously, we've talked a couple of weeks ago that there were some names out there that are interested in the 43 seat if Bubba Wallace were to leave. And it's going to be quite interesting to see what would happen if, like, Clint Boyer gets booted out of the 14 car. Would he go to Richard Petty Motorsports in the 43, and then you see Chase Briscoe or Kyle Larson or someone else take that 14 car? But from Stewart-Haas Racing, they seem like they're pretty happy with their lineup, and I can imagine and understand why that is the case, because Boyer's really stepped it up here lately over the past couple of months and made a case that he is deserving of that seat. So, I mean, I feel like we're doing a silly season prediction video all over again here, Kyle, but
it really does.
The 43 car is open, and, you know, with the way that it's trending, it could be that one win maybe to a playoff team next season, depending on who's in it. So who would you be looking at in terms of some names? We don't have to have an official prediction per se, but what names are you keeping an eye on here as we go down into the closing months of the season?
Well, it's interesting for me because if you look at the history of Richard Petty Motorsports and the two big signings that they've made since really being Richard Petty Motorsports and not kind of that era where they merged with Earnhardt Ganassi there, when it's just been Richard Petty Motorsports, the two hirings they've made was Eric Almirola coming from Junior Motorsports Xfinity program, who had some Cup experience previous, and then Bubba Wallace mainly coming from the Roush Fenway Xfinity program at the time. So the two hirings that they've done have been from the Xfinity series, but I don't really see that happening this time around because the 43 car has been in such big spotlight this season, and it really does seem like they're going to be hiring somebody in the Cup series right now. So where do they kind of go? You've got Clint Bowyer potentially available. I think that could be a decent stopgap if you're looking for a veteran to kind of maybe go in for a year or two and kind of see how the dust settles and maybe lead you in and kind of be that bridge between the current generation of car and the next gen car. Well, maybe something like that works. But then you've got a bunch of different options, whether you look at Corey LaJoie announcing that he's leaving his ride, Daniel Suarez in backmarker equipment if you want to stay with the diversity program and maybe go with Daniel Suarez and maybe maintain some sponsorship there as well. And then you've got the wild card that gets brought up in every conversation in silly season and Kyle Larson. And it wasn't that long ago that we heard David Smith in his article when he was talking about Bubba Wallace, his options and everything going down with RPM, that Andrew Murstein had said that they had some talks with Kyle Larson about what his situation is like right now. So maybe that could be something that even plays out as well. There's so many different things going on right now. If I were to make a bet, I still believe, even though we've kind of heard from SHR that they're kind of leaning towards staying with their current lineup, but then at the same time, we've heard everybody in SHR praise Kyle Larson every time they've given the opportunity. I still feel like Kyle Larson ends up in that 14 somehow, and Clint Bowyer just makes the most sense in the 43. Other than that, if Bowyer does stay and the Kyle Larson wildcard doesn't play out there, I feel like Daniel Suarez is a good fit there. But where do you think that they end up going in that 43?
Like you said, there's a lot of different names. Obviously, one name that has emerged over the past couple of weeks, Ty Dillon, right, with the RCR Alliance there. I think that could be definitely a suitable option. Definitely not the performance kind of caliber driver that you maybe would be looking at for RPM if you're them, but it makes the most sense if Richard Childress wants to keep his grandson in the Cup Series, and they obviously have that alliance, so that would make sense for myself. But I think what you said about if Clint Bowyer is moved out of that 14, I think most of the other seats will be sewn up by then if that's to be the case. So I think that would make the most sense for myself. If I'm RPM, I would definitely look at Clint Bowyer if he gets booted out of SHR because, like you said, it's that stopgap. It makes the most sense with the next generation of drivers and car coming up through the pipeline that he would be a good bridge, and they could go back to the Xfinity Series program and look to bring up from a Chevrolet driver. I don't think Larson makes much sense in the 43 at all. I don't think that's even an option with Chevrolet and all that stuff. Obviously, the Denny Hamlin situation keeps on coming up in terms of what he's trying to think about and with ownership or trying to maybe get a car for,
there's
it's
the
just
wild
crazy.
Card of what happens with the 13 now, and you mentioned Ty Dillon potentially going there because of the RCR Alliance. Well, another wild card is if Bob Germain does sell and Ty Dillon does end up available, then who's buying the charter and what happens there? And is it maybe a competitive team? We don't know. There are still competitive teams in NASCAR right now that don't have the maximum 4 cars. So maybe something happens there. Maybe it's a brand new team like Denny Hamlin. Like there's so many different moving pieces right now. It's just such a fascinating time for silly season. But today we get at least one piece of that, and that's Bubba Wallace isn't returning to RPM, which means there's another new seat available and a big name free agent that's going to be going to one of probably 2 very, very marquee seats.
Yeah, I think this is huge for Bubba Wallace's career. I mean, that can't be understated enough. This is the break he's been looking for his entire career, and it just is great to see for himself. And this time, it's not really kicking anybody out of their seat because there's a lot of options there's 2 options for him to go to that seem basically open to anybody, and it gives an opportunity for somebody else to come and take a 43 car. Maybe you look at someone who's trying to make a name for themselves in the sport, or someone who's like a Daniel Suarez who has had some rough go of things and is looking for that resurgence in his career. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where Bubba Wallace ends up and can confirm that. And obviously we'll bring that to you whenever that does occur.
Hopefully it's soon. Because I don't want to speculate about this. Yeah. I don't want to speculate this any more than we need to. As soon as he has that basically finalized, I want to know right away because that kind of then lets everything else play out in silly season. But this is really the big decision. Is the 48 a potential option? Is the 42 back in things? And if that's the case, which one does he go to?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ross Chastain. I know we didn't really bring him up at all, but he was, in that Chip Ganassi pipeline here. He loves winners, and Chastain proved himself albeit in a short period of time when he did race for the 42 car in their Xfinity Series program. So I'm very interested to see, what this move could impact with Ross Chastain. Obviously, Spire Motorsports bought the charter from the 95 team with Bob Levine. So would you look at something like that where you see Ross Chastain come up through that and then Bubba Wallace goes to the 42 kind of thing? It's just so many different pieces here that have to come together to create this puzzle.
Chastain's a Chevy driver as well, currently running in the Xfinity Series. If you look at the history of the signings that Richard Petty Motorsports has made, whether it's Almirola coming from the Junior Motorsports Xfinity program or Bubba Wallace coming from the Roush Fenway Xfinity program, like he's a potential option in the 43 as well. Like there's a bunch of different things that can happen here with Chastain as well.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to see where this goes from here because I don't think there's any right answer right now. I think it's all up in the air in terms of what you want to happen and what you think will happen, and that's to be determined what will happen. So I'm really excited to see what happens with both the 43 and the driver of Bubba Wallace. So that's about enough on that topic, I'd say, Kyle, and we move on to another big one.
There's so many big ones.
Huge news this week as Auto Club Speedway, a track that's close to my heart. My first NASCAR Cup Series race was going to that track. It's going to be converted from the 2 mile that we have, I've grown to love personally, into a half-mile short track that is going to be a combination of Martinsville and Bristol. From what I've seen with kind of like the layout of the design and some sim stuff that I watched on video, the track looks to be pretty interesting. It's on the front straightaway. They're just reconfiguring the whole thing. I don't know what to think about this. I'd love to get your thoughts first, Kyle, but then I'm kind of like torn on it because I think I'll let you go first here before I get rambling on here. But what were your initial thoughts here of this entirely thrown out of left field news with California?
What the hell? That was my initial reaction. I couldn't believe what I was reading because we've been talking about how we want more short tracks for years and years. It's been forever since NASCAR's added a new one. But I didn't think it would be coming this way. I didn't think it would be coming this way in whether it's tearing down or reconfiguring a current track into a short track, and of all of them being Auto Club as well. I'll start with the fact that if I were to just pick, nothing mattered, ownership, anything didn't matter of who owns the tracks, anything like that. If I were to just pick a track and turn it into a short track, Auto Club would not be my first choice. It would probably not be in my top 5 choices. I do like Auto Club. I think that it's a great track on the circuit. It's one of the 2 mile tracks. If I were to pick between Michigan and Auto Club, I'd get rid of Michigan first. I think that Auto Club is a nice track to have on the schedule. It's a fun track, and I'm a little bit sad to see it go. That being said, every single factor when it comes to Auto Club Speedway and turning it into a short track makes too much sense for NASCAR not to do it. NASCAR owns it, so they don't have to worry about the negotiations there, which they don't with whether you look at Michigan, Texas, any other kind of track that you would maybe look at potentially switching over to a short track. You've got the fact that it's California. It's the closest thing to Los Angeles, Hollywood, celebrity status, all that kind of stuff that you have, and turning it from this kind of big, drawn-out track to a short track, which is the pinnacle of entertainment in NASCAR outside of the super speedway racing, that could potentially draw in more interest in there. You factor in the fact that you're opening up way, way more land space to maybe make the experience around the track better, open up, just because we know how expensive land is in Southern California. It just opens up so many possibilities there by shrinking the track from 2 miles down to a half mile. It opens up so many possibilities. And then you've got everybody wants more short tracks. It diversifies the schedule. Everything makes sense for Auto Club. So I love it from that perspective, but damn, am I going to miss that track on the schedule.
I'm heartbroken, to be honest. Like I've just got a soft spot for it. Like I remember going there and just, the smell of burnt rubber and, just being around an atmosphere of a NASCAR race. And you just picture 8-year-old self just walking around, seeing all these big haulers with merchandise and everything like that. Like this is where it really became a reality. And it's going to be sad to see that track go. it sucks. I wish it wasn't that track, but at the same time, I'm happy that it's, a short track coming to the West Coast. For myself personally, I know it's a bit selfish, but just to get that a little bit closer to out here.
Well, I feel like that's an underrated aspect as to why they're doing it at Auto Club as well, because in that West Coast area, you don't have any short tracks on the schedule. It's your Las Vegas half mile. It's your Phoenix. It's those kind of tracks in and around that area. You've got Sonoma, the road course. You don't have that short track that you get on the East Coast side with Martinsville, Bristol, Richmond. So it does make sense if you're going to add a new short track and build a new one to put it out on the West Coast so the West Coast fans can get that as well. Yeah, it's very interesting that they decided to just totally, basically demolish what is Auto Club Speedway right now and turn it into a short track instead of building it somewhere else kind of thing, and just keeping Auto Club the way it is. It's there's definitely not enough West Coast races, in my opinion, to grow the sport out here. There's only 4 with Vegas, Phoenix, Auto Club as it is now, and then Sonoma. Yeah. And it's not enough at all compared to what we have out east, but it sucks. It's going to be converted by the time of 2023 is their timeline, and they said that they shouldn't be able to miss a race on the calendar from here on out in terms of the construction and everything like that. So hopefully if fans are back at the track and everything is kind of settled down in terms of the pandemic, I will go down there for one last time to experience Auto Club as it is, because that'd be really cool. But I'm excited to see what the track becomes. A short track in itself is huge, and even though it's small, it's going to be huge for the sport. It's going to be really, really fun to watch some West Coast short track racing. And I remember not too long ago, they had 2 races on the calendar for Auto Club, and now they're going to basically, reinvent the place. It's called Next Gen in California. That's how they're calling it. It makes sense with the Next Gen car coming in a couple years' time. Auto Club maybe needing a resurfacing in a couple years' time as well. It just makes sense in terms of not investing in the track how it is now and just totally rebuilding it and creating something new. So I'm excited to see how it turns out, but I'm still heartbroken is probably the best word for myself to see it go the way it is that I've come to love. It's always going to have a soft spot in my heart. But Kyle, this is another kind of schedule in the future here that we're looking at for the NASCAR Cup Series that's going to be changing, and obviously they're listening to fans here when it comes to wanting more short tracks in the future. Yeah, and we were kind of putting our focus on maybe Nashville Fairgrounds as the next place that could potentially get a short track. And now we're getting one in Auto Club, which is crazy. But in that kind of similar timeline, if you're looking at the timeline of going to Nashville Super Speedway for the short term, the mile and a third, or is it a mile and a third or mile? Yeah, I think it's a mile and a third track. It's not a mile and a half. It's one of those weird in-between ones. Yeah, it's like Darlington a little bit when it comes to that. Yeah, so you're going to there for the short term, but the long-term goal is to kind of rebuild up the Nashville Fairgrounds and go back there and add another short track. And if you're looking at kind of the projection of when that would potentially be a possibility, you're probably looking at 23 or 24, and then you're potentially looking at adding short tracks on the schedule in back-to-back years, which is unheard of in recent NASCAR in terms of short tracks. So it's amazing from that perspective. Looking forward, it shows that NASCAR wants to revamp the schedule and are putting it in their own hands and taking it and actually doing it themselves in a track that they own in Auto Club. So it's huge from that perspective as well. And this is just another thing showing that NASCAR wants to revamp this schedule. We know next year we're getting Nashville at the very least in terms of new tracks. We know from recent comments from Steve Phelps that they're in talks to add more new tracks for next season. And what the schedule is going to look like there is it's really their first opportunity in many years to do a lot with the schedule here. And it shows that they want to mix things up. They're not content with how it is right now. And that's exciting from a fan perspective. Yeah, I'm stoked to see what it looks like and the atmosphere and how they're going to configure it and how the fans are all going to be set up and everything like that. From the sketches and everything that I've seen, it's going to be, the front stretch is on the front stretch of where it is. They're just going to obviously remake that and then have kind of like the grandstand as it is, almost staying put, or they're probably going to add a little bit to it in terms of revamping it. But in terms of making the short track what it is and combining Bristol and Martinsville,
I'm excited to see how that works. High banks and relatively short corners is what they kind of have sketched out here. And they ran some iRacing simulations in terms of building that track, and they said that they liked what they saw. So if that's the case, I trust them on that stuff in terms of creating a new short track. Options are limitless in terms of what they want to do. I mean, they can configure it however they want. I just hope that they do it right and they don't mess around with it. I hope they get it right the first time in terms of configuring it. But obviously, Auto Club Speedway is not my first choice in terms of revamping the track. There's definitely a few tracks I could name right off the top that I would rather have doing that, specifically Michigan, because that track drives me nuts. But I like I said many times throughout this little segment here, I'm excited, but I'm heartbroken, and it's bittersweet to see it go off the calendar in a couple of years' time. But this isn't the end of Auto Club Speedway by any means. It's just a new future, and they're rewriting the history books for years to come here. So, any final thoughts here, Kyle, before we move on to the last bit of notes?
Just that I can't believe that this is actually happening. And I cannot wait to see how it plays out. It's going to be nice to kind of enjoy Auto Club in its current iteration these next couple of years, kind of soak that in before it's gone. It's going to be sad to see it off the schedule, but the fact that we're replacing it with a short track that's a blend of Martinsville and Bristol, for crying out loud, I feel like that's an overall win.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more there. So looking forward to what the next gen in California will look like in the future. And I'm sure it'll be very popular amongst NASCAR fans once it finally hits the calendar in a couple years' time. So we got two more news and notes here before we move on to our fantasy previews for Richmond, and that starts off with Bristol Motor Speedway announcing that it has sold out its 30% capacity for next week's race, the third race of the first round of the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, and that's obviously huge. They had fans for the All-Star race earlier this season and for the spring race as well. It seems like it's similar capacity in terms of what they're limiting it to as well. So it's the night race at Bristol, my favorite race of the season, and I can't wait to see that with fans again at under the lights. And obviously we had fans at Darlington this weekend, which was really great to see, and I'm looking forward to seeing fans once again at Bristol as well. And just to round it off here before we get into it, Jacob Cantor, after the penalty to Kyle Busch after Darlington with having two unsecure/loose lug nuts, Jacob Cantor will be the crew chief for Kyle Busch this week after Adam Stevens was suspended for one race. Obviously, Greg Zipadelli is taking over for Clint Boyer this weekend in place of Johnny Klossmeyer. So that's the two crew chiefs there in terms of movement. Jacob Cantor, obviously an engineer with the JGR stable, so he knows what he's doing. It'll be interesting to see if Kyle's performance is hindered or as well. I mean, it's probably not going to – it doesn't take much to be hindered in terms of how he's run this season. So we'll see if there's an uptick in performance this season or this race for Kyle Busch this weekend. So that's all the news and notes that I've got, Kyle. For everything that's happened over the past couple of days. It seems like a week's worth of notes
it's a lot.
And breaking news stories over the past couple of days, but we made it through, and that was fun to talk about. But this is where the rivalry between me and you heats up. As last week, obviously heartbreaking for you to lose fantasy in the way that it did.
Victory slipped through my fingers. Oh, my goodness.
It was unfortunate.
I was 15 laps away from third straight win, starting the playoffs with a dub, looking good, saving that Hamlin usage as well, getting the victory in it. And it all comes crashing down because my two big picks that performed so well wrecked from the lead and go back 20th and 22nd. You pick up the win by like 15 points, 197 to like 183 or something like that. So like 14-point victory for you. And you start off the playoffs getting back in that win column.
Let's hope for a perfect 10-week stretch here. That'd be pretty nice. Okay. But that's all being very optimistic. After what you've done over the past 3 weeks, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very, very even from here on out.
I'm interested to see how it goes today.
We'll be going with the back and forth format, I think, once again. I think that's been working really well. And, man, there's looking at the numbers here, there's definitely some big names, and you look at the JGR stable for sure as the ones that really pop out. Man, I'm interested to see what you've got here. I think
a tough one.
I feel like we're going to have pretty similar lineups. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
I think from what I saw with the numbers and everything that, we've been on pretty consistent basis over the past couple of weekends in terms of our thinking. So I'll start it off with my guy, Kyle Busch. That's my guy for this weekend in terms of having the best numbers at Richmond in his career. He has an average finish of 6.79, 6 wins, 18 top fives in 29 starts, and 1,484 laps led. So not too shabby numbers for Kyle Busch at Richmond. Obviously, I used him last week at Darlington. Kind of a little bit underwhelming in terms of what I was expecting a little bit. This first round is really suiting him, and I don't plan to use him as much as the playoffs roll on. But I like these opening 3 tracks. I'm going to obviously use him at Bristol next weekend. So I'm going to start the playoffs here with Kyle Busch starting in the first 3 races. And depending on how it goes at Richmond here, maybe I put him in the garage. Obviously, that's to be determined. But I like Kyle Busch this weekend. So I imagine you have the same, Kyle.
I don't.
Really? No way.
I am a little hesitant just based on the crew chief change. Of course, Jacob Cantor has been successful with that 54 in the Xfinity Series this season.
Wow.
I am just scared of the brand new rookie crew chief in the playoffs. It's been rough going for Kyle Busch all season long. I just feel like I'm going to save that usage for maybe a slightly more certain time later down the road. I'm just a little hesitant to use that right away for this Richmond and use 2 Kyle Busch usages up right away. It's a little scary for me. So I made the tough decision, despite the fantastic statistics behind it.
Holy smoly.
Not go with Kyle Busch. That being said, my first pick, I feel like this is a pretty clear-cut one as well. Maybe not the overall numbers that you would kind of expect from him at this track, but he won both times last season. 4 overall top 5s in the last 10, 7 top 10s in the last 10. He's either up in that top 3 or he has some issues and he's in the 20s. And it's Martin Truex Jr., of course, as I just mentioned, won both races at Richmond last season. Just this race this season for Richmond, I feel like just based off of his recent performance there in Joe Gibbs equipment, which always shows up at this track, even though I'm not going with Kyle Busch. Bold move there, I got to say. I'm going with Martin Truex Jr. as my number 1 guy. I'm
shocked. I am flabbergasted at your last.
I gotta do something different to try and beat you here, but it's a bold one. Not going with Kyle Busch. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean the reason why I saved Truex last weekend was for this weekend. I really like Truex this weekend. He's become.
Well, I should have got a perfect 60 last week, but
yeah, after seeing his performance on the short tracks after finally getting over that hurdle and, how many times Rick Allen and Mike Joy, he's never won on a short track. And now he's basically become the dominator at short tracks for specifically Richmond and Martinsville. I have Martin Truex Jr. in my lineup as well. He's got an average finish over the last 6 races of 8.17. Obviously, 2 wins last season, the last 2 times we were here at Richmond, and 3 top 5s only in his last 6 races only. But either it's a really good race. Obviously, had the iconic spin and win last fall in the Cup Series race, and he recovered nicely. 777 laps led in the last 6 races there as well. So really strong numbers for Martin Truex Jr. And JGR has been really good on the short tracks this season if they hit the setup. Obviously, that Martinsville race was a bit of an exception earlier this season with Hamlin and Kyle, but I don't imagine that to be the case this time around. So I'm anticipating a strong duo between Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. But I'll go ahead with your second pick here.
Yeah, my tandem going into this weekend, I guess you could say, my number 2 guy here, 1 win over the last 10 races at Richmond, 6 top 5s, 8 top 10s in that time, an average finish of 6.0 in the last 10, finished second in the April race here at Richmond last year, Joey Logano. I didn't go with any Penske guys last week, going to start to ramp up those usages starting this week at Richmond. He's just got the numbers to back it up. I'm, of course, going against the numbers of Kyle Busch there. That's my bold take for this week. But I'm going with the numbers with Joey Logano, of course, the second place finish in April last year that I just mentioned. And overall, very strong numbers here. I feel like Penske has a pretty strong day. Needs to happen for Ryan Blaney. I don't know if that happens, but I really like Joey Logano heading into Richmond here.
Yeah, I also have Joey Logano in my lineup for this weekend. Pretty strong numbers here. He was really close to winning that spring race last season in the epic battle between Boyer himself and Truex for that win there on the old tires, but finished second in the end and has got an average finish in his career here of 11.14. Obviously had that win taken away back in 2017 when he won and then missed the playoffs after having the car being illegal after the race. So he should technically have 3 wins here, but he has 2. And 9 top 5s in his career in 22 starts, 334 laps led for Logano. So solid numbers for him here. And he had a strong weekend last weekend. Maybe that 22 car is starting to uptick the performance like we saw at the beginning of the season when they were so strong. So I definitely look at the Penske of Joey Logano being strong here. So those are 3, Kyle Busch, Truex, and Logano for myself. Who is your third pick for Richmond?
My number 3, well, I mentioned how I like Penske going into this weekend for Logano. I also like it for Brad Keselowski. In the last 10 races here recently, no win, but 3 top 5s, 7 top 10s, an average finish of 8.1. I'm liking Logano and Keselowski this weekend. I saved them both from last weekend. A 7th place and a 4th place here last year for Brad Keselowski. Of course, the 4th coming in the September race at Richmond in the playoffs last year. I feel like those 2 will be solid, and Penske as a whole needs to be really good, especially for Ryan Blaney, as I just mentioned, because Blaney does not have good numbers at Richmond, and he needs to make up some kind of ground on the playoff cutoff line. He's nowhere near my fantasy lineup, but Penske needs to show up this weekend for his sake. And I think because of that, Logano and Brad Keselowski will both have good days, just because they've been so good here at this track, and Penske as a whole needs to be solid this week.
I also have Brad Keselowski in my lineup this weekend. Really solid numbers for Brad once again. When I look at the schedule remaining, I don't know how many tracks I'd really want to play Brad. He gets really good consistent points. I think this would be a pretty good weekend to use him. I think if it's going to be anybody to break up the JGR trio up front, or even the quadruple with Eric Jones maybe getting up there as well. I think Brad Keselowski is probably maybe one of your best bets to do so. So he's got an average finish in his career here of 12.71. 1 win, 5 top 5s in 21 starts, so that's not too great, but 960 laps led, which is a pretty decent stat for Brad. So I like the Penske duo of Logano and Keselowski as well. Blaney, obviously, he's going to be definitely in my stay away froms when we get to it. He's pretty terrible here. So that's 4 guys for my lineup. Who is your 4th guy for your lineup?
My 4th guy, it's the big dog in my lineup. It's Denny Hamlin. 10 races.
All right, I was waiting for it. I thought you were going to wait.
The last 10 here at Richmond. He's got the 1 win, 6 top 5s, 8 top 10s, an average finish of 7th in those last 10 here. But the big thing for me, both top 5 finishes last year at Richmond. In April, finished 5th. In September, backed that up with a 3rd place finish. Just slightly better numbers than Harvick here last year. Of course, Harvick in April, the 4th place finish. In September, the 7th place finish, slightly better. I also have more faith in JGR going into this weekend than Stuart Haas. So I'm going with Denny Hamlin out of the big 2 for my lineup this week. I just feel like Denny Hamlin's got maybe as comparable numbers as Harvick, maybe slightly better if you look over more recent. But it's those 2 big finishes last year, in addition to kind of the overall stats as well for Denny Hamlin, that put him in my lineup over Kevin Harvick for this weekend.
Yeah, and you saved that Hamlin usage last weekend, so that's going to help you out a little bit here. I also have Denny Hamlin in my lineup this weekend. I'm going with the JGR trio and the Penske duo this weekend. I love those 2 organizations here, and I know I'm going through Hamlin usages pretty quick here, back-to-back at Darlington and Richmond, but I think I have a pretty good reason why. I mean, he's so good at both of them. It's his home track here in Virginia, running a special paint scheme for FedEx Cares, and I think he's getting too far away from Harvick's win total this season, 8-6. He needs to close that gap. I think Hamlin's going to be pretty strong again. He's going to be out there for a little bit of redemption after last week and how it ended for him in terms of missing pit road and taking him out of contention there. So he's got a really solid numbers here, second to Kyle Busch, basically amongst active drivers. His career average finish here is 9.15, 3 wins, 13 top 5s in 27 starts, 1,659 laps led for Denny Hamlin, the most amongst active drivers. And I think, you look at GGR's always got the best short track package. I mean, it's basically undisputed at this point. I think they're going to be really, really strong this weekend. So that's 5 of my guys. Pretty similar to what you have. Obviously, my main guy is someone you've kept out of your lineup this weekend. So that's going to be interesting to see. But who is your 5th guy for Richmond?
Number 5. It's my final playoff driver. I'm going with Clint Bowyer.
Man.
The overall numbers maybe don't suggest that you should put him in the lineup. Just the 1 top 5, 6 top 10s in his last 10 races at Richmond. Average finish of 14.3. But the big number for me is 4 straight top 10s at Richmond. Those are some big, big numbers. He's shown up here when he needs to. Last year in April, finished 3rd. In September, finished 8th. Those are 2 big results recently. Of course, the 4 straight top 10s is key for me. He needs another strong weekend if he's going to start to solidify himself in that round of 12. So I have Clint Bowyer in my lineup. And based on that reaction, I think you do as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whoever your 6th guy in has to outscore Kyle Busch this weekend. That's what it comes down to. I've also got Clint Bowyer in my lineup this weekend. I think he's going to be very, very strong. I think he could potentially lead that SHR stable this weekend. I'm definitely staying away from Harvick in terms of this week because I think he's more valuable at other tracks than Richmond, but he's definitely a good play if you want to spice things up and maybe use him this weekend. But I'm not definitely wasting a Harvick usage on something other than 1.5 miles that he's been so good on this season. So Clint Bowyer is my lone SHR guy. I've got 3 Toyotas and 3 Fords this weekend. So staying away from the Chevy camp, and he's got really solid numbers here. The worst was actually second worst average career finish in my lineup, 12.5 compared to Keselowski's 12.71. 2 wins for Bowyer here. Obviously, that came a little while ago when he was with MWR. 5 top 5s in 28 starts. 393 laps led in his career as well. So I like Bowyer a lot this weekend, and after his solid run last weekend with the top 10, I like this round a lot for Clint Bowyer, and I think this is where it really starts for him to get going here with Richmond and then Bristol next weekend. He's going to be really strong at it as well. So that's my lineup, very similar to yours. Obviously, the one big exception was Kyle, like we said. So who is rounding out your lineup that has to beat Kyle Busch essentially this weekend to take home the fantasy crown?
Well, before I say the name, I think one clear thing out of both of our lineups is the fact that this is going to be a very veteran-heavy upfront race this weekend. We haven't seen really any strong results from any kind of the next-gen younger crop of drivers at Richmond, and you kind of see it in some of the stats when doing the research to pick your fantasy lineups here. It's basically all the veteran drivers up at the top in terms of average finish, looking at the past 10 races for me. And then once you get through that, it's all into the younger guys, even your Chase Elliott's, your Ryan Blaney's especially, don't have great numbers here. And so because of that, I'm going to the true veteran of the field. He's shown consistent speed week in, week out these last few weeks. And the big thing for me is the consistency of his finishes. Over these last 10 races at Richmond, he's been in that 6th to 12th place finish every single time. It's 7-time himself, Jimmie Johnson, coming off of the IndyCar announcement, riding high, was looking really good early on at Darlington, kind of fell off as that race went along. But if you look back probably like the past month plus, this team has been firing on all cylinders. You look at the performance at Dover, that double back weekend. They were up front all day long at Daytona and just kind of got caught up in somebody else's mess. And then last week at Darlington, probably should have finished easily in the top 10, just kind of had some strategy go wrong, got caught up in the Hamlin pit road incident, and just kind of dropped back from there. And you look at what he did for you last week, he picked up 34 points for you, was a big reason why you were able to beat me in fantasy. So I'm going to the Jimmie Johnson as well. I'm putting Jimmie in my lineup. 2 top 5s in the last 10 Richmond races, 7 top 10s, an 8.1 average finish. He's not necessarily the top 5 guy, but he's consistently in the conversation for the top 10, and I feel like that consistency is key for me trying to outpoint you. And the big thing here is that I got to have Jimmie Johnson outpoint Kyle Busch, which is a big ask now looking at it based off how things have played out here. But I'm feeling good about Jimmie this week, and at the very least, I'm saving a Kyle Busch usage for later on.
Man, you don't understand how close I was to having Jimmie Johnson in my lineup
really? Okay.
as well. I was so tempted to. He's got solid numbers. When I looked at it, he was so close between. It was, Brad, Boyer, and Jimmy were kind of my three at the end here.
Yeah.
I was like, I could probably switch. I'm going with an all playoff driver lineup this weekend, which is a bit risky. I usually don't like that, but I think that'll pay off a little bit here. But Jimmie Johnson is that one outlier that should be in the playoffs that you look at. And the only reason why I didn't pick him is that Kyle's actually starting in the top 6 this weekend, and I like that starting spot for the 18, and Jimmy has to come up from behind in the pack when it's difficult to pass at Richmond.
Right.
So hopefully those early stage points, if that does happen. I mean, but you look at what happened with Jimmie Johnson last weekend.
Be the difference maker.
And Jimmy came through the pack and finished second in the first stage, right? So, that could mean nothing. If Jimmie Johnson nails the setup and if Hendrick does well this weekend, which I'm kind of on the fence about in terms of that organization here. It's like half good, half bad usually. And if Jimmy's on the good side, you could be looking at a steal this weekend. If Kyle makes a mistake, that could really, really help you. You basically just need Jimmy to outpoint Kyle and maybe one other guy so that it kind of evens out. But I wouldn't count out the 7-time champion after everything he's gone through. So I like your picks. Once again, very similar ground. I put my lineup right here once again. A little bit of a teaser. So it's going to be fun. I'm kind of going to be rooting against Jimmie Johnson this weekend for the first time in a while.
Hey, I got to say that mine is extremely risky. I'm playing kind of that safe conservative card early on here, like I kind of did at Darlington, saving that Hamlin usage. I'm using the first one for him this week, but then saving Harvick as well. Kind of playing that long game, trying to get you maybe in the middle in the end and maybe steal one here early. But it's definitely risky how things have played out. I was hoping for a couple differences at least. Putting it all between Jimmy versus Kyle is very, very risky, but it's how the cards have played out. I'm excited to see how it goes. I'm confident in the rest of my lineup. And who knows, maybe we could get our first tie if we have the top 5 the same. You never know.
Yeah, that's totally possible. What a story that would be. We end up with a 7-3-1 record, or 3-7-1 for yourself.
Yeah.
But, the only reason why I'm thinking I can go aggressive with Hamlin earlier on here is that for that championship race, the championship 4 don't earn stage points, and that's huge in terms of fantasy. You kind of go away from the championship 4 unless it's like your championship pick where you think you could get that 40-point perfect race. So it's kind of because there's usually a couple guys up there that usually stir the pot in the first 2 stages, but then the championship 4 guys come at the end. So that's why I'm kind of going aggressive with Hamlin here in these first 2 races, but then I'll probably save him a little bit here over the middle round here. And then maybe go heavy with him at the end. But
it's a good thing that we got differing strategies, so it's not the exact same every time. But it is
similar drivers.
We got the one difference this week. I was kind of expecting maybe a couple differences. I thought that Clint Boyer might have gone under your radar, but apparently not. That's a little unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that would be my big one this week.
I think you're on the Clint Boyer bandwagon after that road course thing that I totally scooped up on. And then
the road course one,
it's gotten in your head a little bit.
That was good. But hey, I said it off the top here. I had him making it through to my round of 12 because of these 2 races here at Richmond and Bristol. That was my reasoning for it. And hey, I got to back it up and put the faith in the guy to go and get a big points haul. And he's got 4 straight top 10s at this track. I'm hoping he makes it 5.
Yeah, same here. I hope he does well this weekend. But before we end the show, we'll go into the honorable mentions that missed my lineup. Eric Jones was someone I really looked at. JGR finished 1, 2, 3, 4 here last fall, but then Jones had the disqualification after the race, which didn't allow him to advance to the second round, essentially, after being in such a deficit with the points after a poor Vegas race to start off the playoffs last year as well. So Eric Jones was there, definitely. JGR was so good here last season. I think Jones could, build off of that momentum at Darlington and come back with another solid top 10. Cole Custer was one I looked at as well. Really solid numbers in the Xfinity Series here. Won the spring race. I think it was, spring race here last season, and then Bell won the fall race. So I was looking at both of the rookies in terms of that, but their starting positions just kind of teetered me off a little bit. I liked Bowyer more than Custer is what essentially that came down to, but I think Cole Custer could be an underrated guy here this weekend. Even though it would be his first time here in the Cup Series, I think he could perform pretty well in the 41. Obviously, like I said, Kevin Harvick was one I was looking at as well, but I'm going to save those Harvick usages for a little bit later on in these playoffs. Jimmie Johnson as well, like I said, I think he could be pretty strong this weekend, and his teammate Chase Elliott was one I was looking at as well, but I like the 9 car just a little bit more at Bristol next weekend and at some other tracks, especially that Roval and coming up in a couple weeks' time. Kurt Busch, that was another one I was thinking about. I think the 1 car could be one underrated. I think that last spot with Bowyer, there was a whole bunch of different ways you could go with that, whether it's Jimmie Johnson, Kurt Busch, or even if you want to spice it up with a rookie in there, you could. I just went with Clint Bowyer to be just maybe a little bit safer on the number side of things. And Ryan Newman has got exceptional numbers here at Richmond, especially in that equipment that he's got. I don't know if he necessarily has what he's had in previous seasons in terms of that speed, but Ryan Newman could be one that maybe steals a top 10. He usually finds a way to stay on the lead lap, which is essentially key here in the early parts of the races. That first stage can go green for quite a long time, and then if you get caught a lap down, it's hard to recover here because there's not as many cautions here on this short track as others. So it's a long 400-lap race, but it's not too much time to make up ground on if you recover from a penalty or some sort of miscue. So going to be interesting to see how those guys do, but then my stay away froms are all playoff guys this weekend. Matt DiBenedetto starts it off. I don't think he's going to be pretty strong this weekend, along with Brian Blaney. Those two I would highly recommend never putting them in your lineups at this track until they can get a solid finish here. DiBenedetto and Blaney, obviously the lowest in the playoff bubble going into this weekend, minus 17 for both of them. They need huge weekends, but until I see that, I'm going to stay away from them, along with the other Hendrick duo of Alex Bowman and William Byron. Byron's close. I think he could be one that maybe could shock some people this weekend, but based off of numbers and everything that I've seen, I just don't think the 24 car will be up there in that top 6 point range. He could maybe get a top 10 overall points finish. I don't doubt that from the 24 car. But since essentially because of the amount of momentum in that team right now, it's hard to kind of be against the 24 car. But just to be on the safer side of things, I think there's better options this weekend. And Bowman as well. I don't think he's not statistically the greatest around here as well. But very, very interesting to see. If I'm wrong on those, I think that's widely, considered to be the stay away froms this weekend in terms of your playoff guys. Austin Dillon, you never know with that guy right now. He could go out there and really shock some people and get a top 10 as well. I mean, it's up in the air, but I like both of our lineups. I think they both have, obviously they have their strengths because it's very similar. I don't really see a weakness for either of our lineups unless something really bad happens. So I'm excited to see what happens here, Kyle. So who's your winner pick for Richmond this weekend? And before we kind of round out the show.
Yeah, just before I get to my winner pick, the one guy that I really kind of thought about, but just couldn't just because of the starting position and everything involved with that, Christopher Bell. He's won 3 of the past 4 Richmond Xfinity races. He's been incredible at that track, at that level. An average finish of 5th for crying out loud is basically he wins the race or he has some kind of issue and didn't. So if it wasn't for the fact that he was starting way back in 26th or 27th and had to work his way all the way up through the field, I feel like he'll get a good finish. I feel like he'll maybe surprise and get potentially a top 10, at the very least top 15. It's just the fact that he's probably going to miss out on those stage points that deters me away from picking him for fantasy. But I feel like he could really surprise this weekend in that 95, kind of similar to the way that we didn't expect Cole Custer to show up well last week and ended up getting that 12th place finish. So maybe we see some good luck from him this weekend and a good performance. But in terms of my winner pick, it's kind of tough to not go with Martin Truex Jr., but I can't see him going 3 in a row, so I will go with somebody else other than Truex. I don't want to make the Hamlin pick because I don't want to be boring like that, so I'll say Joey Logano goes out and wins Richmond and locks his way into the round of 12.
All right. I like that pick. It's something a little different than what you've done in the past.
A little bit different.
A little bit out there. I mean, obviously, Logano's an experienced driver.
I don't like picking the Penske guy, but I feel like they're going to have a good weekend. So
okay. That's tough. I'm going to go with the JGR trio, whichever one. Yep. I mean, I just don't want to pick Kyle and then he messes up.
Do it.
Screw it.
I don't even have him in my lineup. So it's all or nothing.
I want Kyle to go out there with that secondary crew chief, his interim crew chief here, and win at Richmond. I want it to happen. I think there's definitely a good possibility it could happen. I think his strongest competition this weekend will be Truex after his kind of mess up last week, and he's going to be out there for redemption. But I like Kyle Busch this weekend. But he has been just behind those two teammates of Hamlin and Truex all season long in terms of, he could be that third or fourth guy, but then you've got the two JGR guys of Hamlin and Truex right up there in first and second. So, but I'll go with Kyle. I haven't gone for him in a long time in terms of picking him to win, and I'm tired of him messing up and just not getting the finish. So I hope that happens this weekend. I would love to just know that he's going to make it to the next round and not have to worry for Bristol next weekend if something were to happen crazy at that track. But I'll go with Kyle. So any final thoughts here, Kyle? We've got the Truck Series race tonight, the regular season finale here. As we discussed, who we think is going to go out. It's between Tyler Ankrum, Todd Gillen, and Derek Kraus for that final spot, or we could have a new winner and it could shake everything up tonight. So that's on deck for tonight. And then we've got the two Xfinity Series races this weekend. Kyle running the Friday race tomorrow, and then obviously the doubleheader on Saturday with that series, and then the Cup Series playoff race on Saturday night. The Mugello, it sounds like a gelato, but Mugello Grand Prix for Formula One this weekend as well. So that's going to be very fun to see. And then obviously the doubleheader with IndyCar at Mid-Ohio. So any final thoughts here, Kyle, before we move into another action-packed and busy weekend of motorsports?
Oh, man. For one, I'm extremely nervous in terms of fantasy now. It's definitely a risky strategy for me. It's really kind of tough now to lose that first week now at Darlington, given the kind of lineups that have played out this week. I'm not feeling too confident about things, but anything can happen.
Kyle Busch, man. Anything can happen with him this season.
Anything can happen. The main thing that scares me is those stage points, because Kyle Busch does have the much better odds of getting a decent haul there, but at this point, I'm kind of hoping that we have the same top 5 point finishers and we just get a tie. I'm okay with that at this point. But no, it's shaping up to be a fantastic weekend in sports. And it's nicely evened out and spaced out as well, because it starts Thursday night tonight and goes all the way through to Sunday morning and through to even Sunday afternoon with IndyCar there. So very, very good. Busy weekend. I'm excited for things for the Truck Series regular season finale tonight. Trevor Bayne back in competitive equipment.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
The Nice Motorsports equipment last week at Darlington, but was in one of their secondary trucks, so had some tough times there, specifically with some pit road issues. But back in competitive equipment, in place for Ty Majeski this tonight, which is kind of weird in its own right. Don't know what's happening there. We still haven't heard anything about that, but Trevor Bayne back in competitive equipment. David Reagan is racing once again tonight. Exciting from that perspective. And then, of course, you've got the cut line there. Can anybody come back and finish well for the first time in Richmond in quite a while for the Truck Series? And then everything else playing out this weekend is going to be a very, very good time.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be busy. I'm not going to really have any time to leave the screen. It's very. I mean, we've got classes on the go now, so it's going to be interesting to see how we prioritize our time as we go into the weekends here. But I'm not complaining that we've had so much news over this week. It's probably the best week to do it before we get really busy here.
Incredible. I'm hoping the news kind of gives us a break for the next week, so we can just finally take the time to talk about the races and not have to talk like 45 minutes about all the breaking news as well.
Yeah, just start with the race recaps and then say the breaking news for later in the week.
It's been so thick and fast right now, the amount of news, but I feel like all the big stuff is kind of died down for a little bit now with Vettel, Perez, with Johnson now announced, and with Bubba Wallace now announced. Hopefully we get like a week, maybe like 10 days before another big bomb drops, but knowing motorsports and the way it is, we'll probably get another big one tomorrow.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, someone, could catch COVID and this whole thing could be caught up in the air, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of days, but we've got it covered here at the Green Flag. So make sure to go follow us there on Instagram. Lots of cool stuff there over the past couple of days with our fantasy recap from last weekend, a clip from our previous show as well, and then a couple of graphics as well. So lots of busy stuff, and we're trying to stay on top of it here as classes start, but it's been a lot of fun here over the past couple of months here to recap everything. So look forward to recapping everything from this weekend. Busy weekend of motorsports, like I said, and we're excited to bring it all here at the Green Flag. So with that, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman, signing off for now. We'll talk to you again on Monday to recap all this weekend's races in motorsports.